name is Mick Murray, and I'm 28 years old, and I'd like to say a few things about how God set me free from sexual addiction. I grew up in a house that was fairly moral. My parents were not Christians, but they raised me in a way that they thought was best. But I was introduced to pornography at a young age, from really as long as I can remember. I can remember it being around the house or with friends, even in elementary school, looking at pornography. And we got the internet when I was maybe in 6th grade, and that just became really a very regular part of my life, looking at internet pornography. And my sophomore year in high school, I started going to a church, and the youth pastor challenged me and a group of guys to start getting together to talk about spiritual things and to pray together. And so we started broaching the subject of sexual addiction and pornography and messing around with girls, and what's okay, what's not okay. And at that time I started to realize, wow, this thing is really eating my lunch and is keeping me from the fullness of life that God intended me to have. I started to try to not do these things, to not look at pornography, to not do some of the other things that I was doing on a daily basis and sometimes multiple times a day. And I had some successes. I would maybe go a week or 2 weeks or a month and have walk in some relative freedom, but then inevitably, ultimately, I'd fall right back into the same things, into the same patterns. And then went on a mission trip, spring break, my freshman year, and encountered the power of the Holy Spirit unlike I ever had before. So 6 months went by, and had been walking out in a lot of freedom. So I went home summer after my freshman year and thought that I'd really kicked this addiction, and was excited. Was full of faith and seeing things of God that I never knew it existed that year. Most of the summer was doing just fine until one night I was on the computer late at night. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was back knee deep, waist deep in the same stuff that I had been for so many years. Afterwards, I felt so broken that I ended up on my bathroom floor in my house, and I remember laying there asking God to take my life. I sensed the presence of God in that bathroom more tangibly and more powerfully than I ever had before up to that point. I don't know how to describe it except to say it just felt like God was there in the room with me. And it was electric. At the same time, I felt maybe the most loved, because I recognized that He was drawing near in the moment of my deepest shame and guilt and just dirtiness. But it was also terrifying, because I sensed His holiness and His purity in the midst, kind of clashing with my impurity and my sin. I felt like the Lord told me, when I say I felt like the Lord told me, it was just there was a thought that just came into my mind really powerfully, that if I would remain that broken, that He would deliver me every day for the rest of my life, that He would give me the power that I needed to walk free from sin the rest of my life. I think God had mercifully shown me that I couldn't do it in my own strength, but by allowing me to get to that place of brokenness, He was showing me that on my own I couldn't do it, but if I would trust in Him, that He would deliver me, because He can. And He purchased my freedom on the cross and through His resurrection. And if I would trust in that power, that He would deliver me every time I was tempted for the rest of my life. Just because I'm walking out in freedom doesn't mean I'm any more free than any other guy, but freedom isn't based on me, it's based on Jesus. And I'm just as susceptible today, after nearly 8 or 9 years since that moment. I'm just as susceptible today as I was in that moment, but I'm also just as empowered today as I was in that moment to walk free from sin because of who Jesus is. I have not gone a day without temptation. The temptation has not gone anywhere, but those words echo in my mind that God would deliver me every time I'm tempted, and He has done just that, not because of who I am, but because of who He is, daily offering me a way out. One of the verses that I memorized during that time of trying to walk out in freedom was 1 Corinthians 10:13, says that no one is tempted beyond what he can bear, but even when we are tempted, God's faithful. He'll not allow us to be tempted beyond what we can bear, but He'll provide a way out so that we can stand up under it. Not only has it been powerful and fruitful in my own life, because Matthew 5:8 says, "A pure in heart will see God," but God is really using it to minister to so many other men who deal with this addiction, and the ability to stand before them and say, you can walk free from sexual bondage, you can walk in freedom from sexual sin, is a powerful testimony that I love to proclaim. And it's ultimately a testimony of Jesus. It's not a testimony about me, because if I can be set free and walk in freedom, then anybody can. I love the fact that I was able to give my wife a story of redemption and not a story of ongoing cyclical sin and bondage. And I'm able to pass on a legacy of a testimony of the power of the cross to my son, in hopes that that cycle was broken with me. And I want to encourage all of you out there who might be dealing with sexual addiction and the cycles of sexual bondage, that you can be free too, not because you try really hard, but because you surrender yourself to the grace and the power of Christ that He purchased for you by His death on the cross. You too can be free.